I think that just as we're living in a nuclear age, we have grown so tremendously in scientific knowledge. It doesn't seem too much to say that men can begin to awaken to the fact that they haven't grown enough spiritually and haven't recognized their spiritual capacities.
Once something like eating is death, then you've struck at the very heart of life. The enemy of the older radical theories may have been the ruling class, but today the stakes of whether we will reform ourselves into a new kind of human being, a new kind of society, whether we will find selves worth being, the stakes of it are simply life itself.
As some of you know, I have spent the last, I don't know what it's been, maybe 4 or 5 weeks, reading selections from different Platonic dialogues, having to do with the doctrine of the forms, and Plato's views on matters like the gods, soul, eternity, issues that are related to religion. And I want to do a little kind of takeaways session here about that, and also to kind of maybe talk about a couple of ideas I have for upcoming classes for the Maurin Academy, and what I might want to do next on the channel. This mode kind of worked out for me. In other words, I did the readings for the class, thought about them by putting videos out on the channel, and then I taught the class, and the students had the advantage, or the participants had the advantage of being able to watch the videos ahead of time, the readings, if they wanted to. Some of them did, some of them didn't, I'm pretty sure. And then, but that process then put me into a good frame of mind for teaching the class. So I like that, and I'm thinking about what kind of classes I want to teach in the future. But anyway, just a couple of takeaways, I think, from the readings and the class that I just taught, it was called More Real Than the World, Ancient Insights into the Nature of God. And there were over 60 people who registered for this class. So I think there was a real interest in Plato there that I was quite surprised by, and of course, pleasantly surprised. And so, Plato is always on the docket. Again, there's so much there. And I do love Plato. I had never spent all that much time dealing with the doctrine of the forms and the mythologies in the dialogues, and his reasoning about the existence of God or the gods and things like that, the afterlife. I had never spent a lot of time thinking about it. I've certainly covered these things in my classes, but in my mind, I've always kind of put them to a side because I am into political philosophy. And so those are not inherently the most obvious political parts of the dialogues. And of course, in my teaching, I focus a lot on the very political dialogues, particularly Gorgias and Republic, because they're so obviously politically applicable. So this really forced me to think about how I had previously perceived Plato and the ways in which that had limited me. I had not studied up on Neoplatonism. I knew a little bit about it, but not much. I had always kind of figured what's the point in studying the Neoplatonists if you can study Plato, and so on. And I now see the need, so I'm going to do a little bit of that this summer. For instance, I'm going to read about, and I'm going to read Plotinus and kind of just see the transformation from Socrates/Plato to, the development of Neoplatonic thought. And then that did connect up with Christianity. So, Christianity got Plato's ideas primarily through the Neoplatonists. So I'm going to do that, but I've kind of had to change the way I perceive Plato. I hadn't completely ever thought of him as a secular thinker. I think that I just emphasized the secular bits of the dialogues. But in a class that I teach, um, I cover this, the Platonic dialogues, Plato and also Aristotle, through the lens of Charles Taylor's A Secular Age. And so I had started the process several years ago by incorporating Taylor's analysis. I had started the process of thinking of Platonic thought as enchanted, as but I had primarily still thought of this as because of the doctrine of the forms. But now I see that there's more of a connection there. And more than ever, I do think that that Plato was, among other things, somebody who thought deeply about who the gods were and their existence, and even whether there was simply one God and the nature of that God, and so on. And so I think this is a very interesting topic. So I can now see the enchantment more clearly. I'll be in a better position to be able to teach this class again, which I'm doing in the fall for my institution, not for the Maurin Academy, but I might do it at some point. In fact, if you'd be interested in taking that type of class, ancient and medieval political thought, um, where we read original works and also Charles Taylor, let me know in the comments because that's something I might do in the future. I tend to take smaller bits for the Maurin Academy. That would be a lengthier thing to do. Uh, so that that's really the main takeaway for me is kind of opening my mind to this nature, this part of Plato, and then also to realize that people, I primarily interacted with Christians, but I think the same thing would probably apply to at least the monotheistic religions generally. I didn't quite realize how interested Christians could be in this topic, um, and why. And I had not really anticipated how strongly connected Platonic thought is with Christianity. So I'm still reading about that. I do also realize now that people have strong feelings about this. Um, but nevertheless, one thing that we learned was that um, early Christians simply swam in the waters of, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Roman culture sucked up Greek philosophy. This was the intellectual framework that the gospel writers were born into. There's no way that they wouldn't have been pretty profoundly influenced by it. And so we have to take this into account when we're reading it. It helps more than I thought to really fully take this into account while reading them. And then, other early Christian theologians moving forward. So anyway, these are just some thoughts. If you would be interested in eventually taking a class that covered ancient and medieval political thought more thoroughly while reading Charles Taylor's A Secular Age, or at least listening to it. We never make people read these things, but it definitely would be a good idea to read Taylor. Uh, let me know. And then also, I was thinking about revisiting Jung. You guys know that I wrote a book a few years back. It was published in 2019 called Ideological Possession and the Rise of the New Right. And that was, it was drawn from, a lot of it was drawn from research I'd done quite a bit earlier in my life, basic research on Jung's writings, where I kind of poured through an awful lot of what Jung wrote, looking for his political ideas. And I had thought about just writing a book on the political ideas of Carl Jung, but I realized that there is a antipathy towards Jung in the scholarly world, and that I couldn't probably get tenure or promotion on the basis of such a book. Okay. And I'd sort of set it aside and I got interested in other things. But then the times, the political turmoil that we'd been going through and still are, not just here in the United States, but around the world, that's very much of an ideological nature and a cultural nature. It brought this research to my mind again. I wrote that book, adding to it with contemporary literature and events. Uh, but Jung is fascinating, and there's a lot more to say. I could definitely teach a class on Jung's political thought, where students would be encouraged to read two or three fairly short pieces that he wrote specifically on politics. And I think that you'll find that the popular notion of what Jung was all about politically is kind of blown by like reading Jung, specifically on this issue. So that would be like one idea I would have. And in which case, I mean, in all of these cases, I'd start reading selections ahead of time, and over the course of time, those would come out on the channel with a little bit of commentary, and then I would teach the class. The other book that I'm thinking about, maybe by Jung, covering is Aeon. Researches into the phenomenology of the self. The archetype of the self is like it's huge, and if you're going to understand Jung, you've got to understand the self and the ways in which it does very much have political implications. Some of the chapters in this include the ego, the shadow, the syzygy, anima and animus. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Better find out. The self, Christ, a symbol of the self, the sign of the fishes, the prophecies of Nostradamus, the historical significance of the fish, the ambivalence of the fish symbol, the fish in alchemy. Yes, alchemy. The alchemical interpretation of the fish, background of the psychology of Christian alchemical symbolism, Gnostic symbols of the self, and the structure and dynamics of the self. And so I could cover all or part of this. I'm tempted to leave a few things out. And then connect what he says here with his observations about the dynamics of political extremism, totalitarianism, ideological possession, and so on and so forth, because there are very much connections to be made there. So let me know what you think of that idea, because it would be, I haven't read this in a while, right? So it'd be interesting for me to go back through it. I think I'd very much enjoy it, which is pretty much important for me when I'm doing these. It has to kind of fit in with what I'm interested in, of course, and what I'm working on. And I think that I could then teach a good class for the Maurin Academy on Jung of this broader nature, not just his political thought, but his researches into the phenomenology of the self, and then making connections with his political thought. These are just some ideas. I'm sure you guys have other ideas of what I might cover. So, I'm open to like taking a look at them. Just realize that my choices always have to do with what I think is important and what I'm interested in. And if a suggestion matches up with that, then I will do it. But it has to be important to what I'm thinking about now, and it has to fit in with what we teach at the academy too. So anyway, hopefully I'll get some good ideas, or I'll get some feedback about these ideas, and that will give me some fodder moving forward. If you are interested in viewing the More Real Than the World sessions, there are 4 sessions. Pretty soon they'll be in the Maurin Academy store, or you can become a patron and you get access to all of the Maurin Academy content. So all the backlog of like courses that we've taught so far, as well as our upcoming courses, our reading groups, and just everything that we do. So think about that. Sign up for our free newsletter as well. Go to our website, sign up for that so you know what we're offering. And one way or the other, I hope to see you. And thanks for listening. Thanks ahead of time for your ideas.